Black Janitor sang by the sick white girl. 2 days later, the impossible happened. What happens when a fired janitor becomes the voice a school tried to silence? A month later, his song is louder than ever. What followed didn't just change the school, it redefined what respect looks like. Sometimes the world doesn't crumble with a bang. It doesn't erupt with fire or flood. Sometimes it collapses quietly, in the dead space that follows a good deed. And James knew that silence all too well. He'd heard it echo down polished hallways, felt it fill the spaces left by half-hearted apologies, watched it settle in rooms where nobody looked him in the eye. Was it irony? Maybe. But as his late grandfather used to say, a black man can't just be good in this country. He's either a threat or he's invisible. James was the kind of man the world didn't write about, unless something went terribly wrong. He worked as a janitor at Westland Academy, the kind of school where wealth didn't just speak, it whispered through silk-lined hallways and rolled its R's with Ivy League confidence. It was a school where white boys bore last names longer than family trees, and white girls had legal representation before they even learned how to spell representation. James knew better than to disturb the ecosystem. Every morning, he walked the halls like they were landmines, careful, silent, a ghost in gray overalls. His goal wasn't just to clean, it was to disappear. No footprints, no scent, no voice. Because at Westland, a black man with a mop was only one wrong glance away from becoming a headline. And yet that Tuesday morning, as sunlight stretched through the windows like long fingers pointing out flaws in the floors he'd polished, James heard something that stopped him dead. A cough. Not your everyday tickle-in-the-throat kind of cough. This one was harsh, metallic, like rusted chains clinking in her lungs. It clawed through the corridor, coming from the girls' restroom. He froze. That was the rule. Freeze. Do not move. Do not be curious. Because for black men, curiosity isn't charming, it's criminal. But James was raised differently, by a woman who taught him that you don't walk away from a child in pain, even if the world tells you to. So he pushed open the door, his heart a drumbeat of dread, and stepped inside. There she was, a small, pale girl, no more than 12, collapsed against the wall, face flushed white like paper, uniform soaked in sweat, trembling like a leaf caught in winter wind. Alone. No teacher, no nurse, no staff with safety training badges. Just her and him. He crouched down, careful to stay at arm's length. Everything in him screamed, "Don't move too close. Don't touch. Don't even breathe too loud. Are you okay?" His voice was gentle, the same voice his mother used to soothe him through childhood thunderstorms. She nodded, barely. "You scared?" She nodded again, slower this time. "Daddy's always busy," she mumbled. James reached into his cart, pulled out an unopened water bottle, the kind he bought in bulk from the corner store, and laid it down before her like a peace offering. And then he sang. He didn't plan it. It wasn't heroic or rehearsed. It was instinct, an old lullaby passed down generations. The kind of tune meant to patch broken spirits and hush the monsters we can't see. His voice was low and steady, floating between the tiles and broken breath. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer, just stayed there, a man and a child, connected by nothing but sound. And as he sang, her breathing softened, her shaking slowed. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. Then, footsteps, heels clicking like accusations. The nurse burst in, gasped, and rushed to the girl's side. James stood up slowly and walked out. No words, no thanks. Because when you're a black man doing something kind in a white world, you don't stick around for the applause. You leave. Fast. 2 hours later, he was summoned to the principal's office. Not with a thank you or a nod of appreciation. Oh no. This was no celebration. This was judgment. The office was cold, not from air conditioning, but from the stiff posture of 3 white faces waiting inside. Principal Watson, Security Officer Greer, and Mr. Legal, the school district's personal pit bull in a tie. "Mr. Norton," Principal Watson began. Her voice dipped in that uniquely white tone of restraint that somehow managed to carry centuries of suspicion. "You violated school policy. You entered the girls' restroom without clearance." "There was a child in distress," James answered, calm and steady. "She was coughing, shaking. No one else was around. You should have called administration. And wait 10 minutes while she lost consciousness?" Security Officer Greer leaned forward, jaw clenched. "It's not your place to decide. She's not your child." James blinked, slow and unimpressed. "Number, but she is a child." That silence that followed, That wasn't awkwardness. That was the silence of decisions already made. That was the sound of gears grinding in a system too proud to admit it eats its own humanity. You're suspended, effective immediately, without pay, pending investigation. He nodded once, no tears, no outburst, just turned and walked out. And he didn't slam the door, because in their world, loud exits were a luxury only white men could afford. Meanwhile, in a glossy hospital suite reserved for the powerful, Lily Martin, the girl, the senator's daughter, stared blankly through the window while 4 tubes fed her fluids. Her father was there physically, but his mind was in his phone. "Dad," she whispered. He grunted without looking up. "The man who sang, where is he?" He paused, looked at her, really looked. Not as a campaign prop or a headline, but as a daughter. One asking about the janitor. Back at Westland, the whispers began. And anyone who's ever lived through a scandal knows, whispers grow teeth. "You heard what happened? He sang. That's weird. Something's not right with him. You don't just sing to kids like that. Why was he even in there?" Someone snapped a picture of the office door. Someone else pulled the security cam footage of James leaving, mop in hand, head held neutral. It hit Twitter before sunset. The hashtag, janitor incident. And then came the post. Bella Hartford, PTA Royal, keyboard vigilante. Black janitor sings to sick white girl in school bathroom. Who's hiring these people? The fire caught. Fast, likes, shares, outrage, fear. Not a single comment asked if the girl was okay. Not one. Back in his tiny apartment, where the wallpaper peeled like old scabs and the ceiling leaked tears, James sat in silence. On his lap, the same water bottle he'd given her. Empty now. Like him. He didn't understand why it happened, but Lord, he understood how. Because in this world, even kindness becomes suspicion when it's delivered by a man with skin like soil. As schools whispered about policy revisions and parents clutched pearls over safety concerns, one girl lay awake in a hospital bed, eyes wide in the dark, and whispered to the night nurse, "Where's the man who sang? He made me feel safe, not them." When Tuesday morning came, James Norton woke to nothing but silence. No ringtone, no voicemail from HR, no outreach from the director, and certainly no apology from the senator's office. Just silence that felt as heavy as a wet overcoat draped over his shoulders. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. His mop lay discarded on the tile, and his uniform hung on the chair. Clean, pressed, ordinary. Everything looked as usual, except James no longer felt part of that usual. Then suddenly the storm arrived. It began with the local paper, thrown on doorsteps at dawn like a taunt, its headline bold enough to sting, "Westland Scandal. Black janitor breaks protocol, approaches senator's daughter." Beneath that gargantuan font, a photo of James walking away from the school, alone, silent, composed, and yet the caption turned him into a predator. Moment after incident in girls' restroom. Just 4 words, girls, restroom, janitor. That was enough to convict him before anyone cared about context. Once you mention black and girl, half the story's already decided. Then the TV trucks showed up, parked like sharks circling the dock. Cameras swung at him the moment he stepped outside his apartment. Mics thrust in his face before he could even button his shirt. "Do you plead guilty? Why did you enter the bathroom? Is it true you actually sang?" And then there was Claire Stanford, the white reporter with a voice smooth as porcelain and sharp as steel, tilting her head as she said, "Mr. Norton, how do you justify your behavior given the sensitivity of the situation and the fact that it involved a minor?" He looked her square in the eye, slow and steady. "Can you explain how in a school of 400 kids, not one adult happened to be near a child who needed help?" Silence, then quick cut. In that night's broadcast, his voice vanished. They aired only footage of him walking away, ominous music droning. No explanation, no context, nothing to humanize him. Just frames, just fear, just fog. Meanwhile, the senator was at a glamorous charity gala, champagne glass in hand, telling the crowd, white faces flickering in crystal light, that children's safety is our top priority, and without missing a beat adding, with marital calm, "As a father, I am appalled by what happened. Unsupervised employees should never be allowed access to our children in private spaces." He had no idea it wasn't protocol he was worried about. It was his fear of exposure. Lily, meanwhile, laid hook to IVs, sobbing quietly. Not because she regretted telling the truth, but because everyone had already cast her as a victim. And she felt like a traitor who had failed to fit the story. "He was just there," she told the nurse, tears trailing down. He didn't touch me. He just sang. The nurse said nothing, but the next day the Southern Digest published a short post titled, "The Voice of Calm, What the Westland News Didn't Show You," written by nurse Linda Fay. By now, things in the school had reached a fever pitch. Students divided into cliques, whispering behind lockers. "Did you see that security cam footage? He didn't touch her. Then why in the world did he sing? That's odd behavior. Or worse, I heard he's troubled. Nah, he's just poor. Yeah, and now unemployed." Just when it seemed James would burn entirely in that wildfire of accusations, a video appeared on YouTube, captured by Julian Kim, an 11th grader who happened to record the moment James crouched beside Lily. The image was grainy, but the audio pristine, his voice humming the lullaby, Lily breathing softer, stillness between them. No contact, no violation, just human presence and song. The algorithm did nothing at first, but someone noticed, posted it to Twitter, then TikTok, then Reddit. That whisper became a chant. He sang "Not Hurt." Next morning, lawyers showed up at James's door, representatives of the janitorial staff union, legal counsel in hand. The message wasn't hostility, but inquiry. "We're pressing charges for defamation and racial discrimination. Are you ready to testify?" He nodded wordlessly, resolutely. Then something unexpected happened. At the hospital, Lily convinced her father to record a short video. Her voice trembled, but clarity rang in every word. "My name is Lily Martin. I am the senator's daughter. That day I was scared. James came. He did not touch me. He just sang. I was not afraid anymore. He did what no one else did. He stayed." That video exploded online. 1 million views in one night. Truth hitting so hard it made silence impossible. From that moment, everything shifted. The school turned into chaos. Parents threatening lawsuits, students demanding answers, teachers whispering. We always felt something was off about that firing. And then Sky, an 11th grader who had first posted the footage, took matters into her own hands. She circulated petitions, dozens, hundreds, thousands of signatures, digitally and physically, all under the rallying cry number, "He Sang Not Hurt." 1,000 signatures, then 5,000, then 12,000. In the principal's office, students synchronized their phones to play the lullaby, headphones on, playlist queued, corridors, classrooms, cafeteria, all vibrating with that melody. They drowned the school in the very voice they tried to erase. And James? James sat in his apartment. No job, no TV on, no headline chasing, just waiting and singing to himself. Because when you choose truth, you don't chase recognition. You stay silent until the world listens. A journalist caught him in a candid video. "Why didn't you sue immediately?" His answer, soft but firm, "First, I wanted to figure out whether I had done something wrong or if they had. Now I know." If anyone out there still thinks justice shows up like a polite dinner guest, all soft-voiced apologies, limp handshakes, and "please don't hold a grudge," then they must have spent their life eating pudding with a silver spoon. Because for James Norton, justice didn't come wearing a pressed suit and reading from a prepared statement. It came like a tidal wave, wild, uninvited, and relentless. First it knocked him off his feet, then it dragged him across the sharp rocks, and only afterward did it decide whether to let him stand back up. It was the 4th morning since Westland went up in a scandalous smoke. James woke not to peace but to a sound, not a ringtone, not an alarm, but a knock. Sharp, brazen, not asking, announcing. He opened the door to a camera, not a cell phone held by a teenager, a real camera with a boom mic, a crew, and a young woman standing center frame, dressed in the color of power. Navy blazer, sharp collar, eyes like they'd seen too much and still wanted more. "Mr. Norton, I'm Elisa Brooks with the Black Lens. We'd like to tell your story, the real one." James considered slamming the door. That reflex had kept him safe more times than he could count. But something in her voice, maybe the steadiness, maybe the weariness, convinced him otherwise. He stepped back and let them in. His apartment told its own story. Cracks in the ceiling, stains that told of battles with leaks lost long ago, and one old recliner with armrests worn down by time and prayer. But in the corner stood a bookshelf, worn but proud. Baldwin, King, Malcolm, heavy artillery for anyone raised outside the safety net of the system. "We don't want to edit you," Elisa said. "No cuts, no scripts, just truth." So James spoke, not like a man defending himself, but like someone who'd spent decades being misunderstood and finally had a chance to put words to silence. "I saw a child in trouble. I stopped, I stayed, I sang. I didn't touch, I didn't cross any lines, I just didn't leave. Those words, recorded without a dramatic music cue or digital effects, went online 6 hours later. They didn't go viral because they were shocking. They went viral because they were still. In a sea of yelling heads and accusatory fingers, James stood like a mountain, quiet, present, real. People watched and didn't see a predator or a martyr or even a hero. They saw a man, bone-tired but unbroken. And then came the letter, official, heavy paper, state seal stamped like a warning, an invitation from Senator Martin himself, requesting a private meeting to clarify public positions. Translation, I'm cornered. Time to act like I care. James didn't jump. He didn't even respond that day. First, he called his union, then his attorney, then a civil rights liaison from a legal nonprofit. Only after all that, he gave a nod. All right, but I'm not walking in there alone. On the day of the meeting, the state administration building looked calm on the outside, but inside, the walls were sweating. James arrived not in silence, but in strength, with his lawyer, 3 community advocates, and Sky, the high school junior who'd launched the petition that brought national attention to his case. In her hand, a printed list of 48,132 signatures. Senator Martin stood like a man trying to swallow a grenade without letting anyone see it. Suit pristine, smile too tight. Mr. Norton, I'd like to extend my apologies. Things got out of hand. James raised one eyebrow, a subtle but unmistakable signal. Things don't get out of hand by accident, he said evenly. They're released. You weren't outraged by lies. You got scared of the truth. A silence fell, not awkward, but heavy, weighted with guilt and optics. Sky laid her documents down, calm and deliberate. This isn't just about Mr. Norton. We've collected records from 6 other cases, all black staff, all punished for breaking protocol to help. You want this to disappear. We want this to be the start of change. That same day, Lily's testimony video began circulating again, clipped, captioned, translated into 3 languages. He didn't do anything wrong. He just sang. I felt safe. Senator Martin had no choice but to publicly align himself with his daughter's words, not because he'd had a change of heart, but because he finally understood, if you can't silence the song, you might as well pretend to join the choir. Within 24 hours, the district emailed every school in the county a new draft policy, interpersonal conduct and cross-cultural compassion in educational environments, drafted and reviewed by James's legal team. But the most powerful moment didn't happen in courtrooms or offices. It happened at Westland's auditorium. They called a general assembly. Students, parents, teachers, every hallway emptied into the seats. On stage, no banner, no flowers, just one microphone and one chair. James walked to the front, still in his janitor's uniform, still not a politician, just a man who refused to vanish. I'm not here to be your symbol, he began. Symbols are printed on flags and forgotten in a drawer. I'm not going away. He paused. The room was so quiet, you could hear someone breathe 4 rows back. I thought if I stayed quiet, kept my head down, did my job right, I'd be safe. But turns out, even a lullaby can get you fired, depending on who's listening. Another pause, a glance toward the rows of parents, faces tight with realization. I don't want your claps. I want the next time a black man helps a white child, you don't reach for your lawyers. You ask yourself, what would I have done in his place? The auditorium stood, not out of pity, not even admiration, but recognition. Later that week, the school district tried to bring James to court for reputational damage and inappropriate media exposure. The judge, an older black woman with a no-nonsense bun and eyes that had seen too many charades. This man, she declared, is the only person in this story who acted on conscience. Case dismissed. Final resolution? On the 6th day after the firestorm, Westland offered James a new position. Not janitor, not assistant, but coordinator of emotional support and inclusive culture. Triple salary, full benefits, public recognition. James declined. At first, I'm not your mascot, he said. I'm not here for brochures. But the new principal, younger, listening, made an offer that mattered. Not a title, a platform, real voice, real power. James agreed, on one condition. I keep the uniform. My mama wore one just like it. So did her mama. I'll wear this patch and hold this mop because I'm not ashamed. That Friday, the auditorium filled again. This time, no speech. Lily walked on stage, still pale, still recovering, but sure. She held the mic, looked out at the faces who'd once pitied her, and now listened. This song, it played in my head when I thought I wouldn't make it. Now, when I hear it, I know someone stayed. Someone cared. The melody started, not over speakers, from the crowd. James didn't sing. He stood in the back, beside the cafeteria workers, the guards, the night janitors. He didn't need to sing, because sometimes your silence says, I stayed, I'm still here. And that changes everything. 1 full month had passed. Westland Academy gleamed again. Marble floors waxed to mirror perfection, glass walls shining like nothing had ever cracked beneath the weight of truth. The scandal, buried. Headlines disappeared like footprints in fresh snow. The protests that once rang through its gates had faded to memory. The video, the testimony, the song, just noise in the plumbing now. If you ask the administration, this school had mastered the art of erasure, not by fire or fury, but by routine. The daily grind of privilege wore down the rough edges of conscience until all that remained was polished silence. But not everybody forgot. At the school's entrance, right where James Norton had once stood like a shadow nobody acknowledged, there now hung a sign. Nothing gold-plated, nothing expensive, just a plain white plaque, black block letters, stark, unshakable. We sing not for glory, but so someone survives till morning. Sky had put it there, quietly. No approval, no form submitted, no signature needed. And when the new principal, younger, bolder, still unsure where she stood in all this, asked who'd done it, the entire 11th grade stood up together and said, in a perfect unison, we did. James. He wasn't at Westland anymore, not mopping floors, not wiping down stair rails. No, now he sat in council chambers, an official consultant for the city, appointed to the newly formed Commission on Inclusion and Human Response in Education. A mouthful of a title, sure, bureaucratic, precise, and powerful in the right hands. But James, he still wore his uniform, that same faded clean gray set with the stitched name patch and bleach-marked sleeves. Not for fashion, not for nostalgia, but for memory. As long as folks think a uniform means less than, I'll keep wearing mine, he told the local radio host one morning, his voice steady like a sermon. If I'm standing here with a bucket, that don't mean I'm beneath you. It means I'm cleaning up after those who think they're above everybody else. The call-in lines lit up for hours. Brother James, I worked 30 years in a laundromat, and you just said what I've been trying to say my whole life. You gave my son courage. He's on a construction site every day, and he used to hide it. Now he holds his head up. And on the day Lily returned to school, not as the senator's daughter, but as the girl with the song, it wasn't cameras waiting at the gate. It wasn't handlers, reporters, or cautious security. It was a choir, a real one. Students, teachers, cafeteria workers, maintenance crew, standing shoulder to shoulder, no microphones, no instruments, just voices. And they sang, not for the show, not for the crowd, but for her, that same lullaby, that same steady hum of presence. As she stepped into the courtyard, Lily found James waiting. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the building. You ready to study behind those glass walls again? She smiled, no fear in her face now. Just trust, if you're still around. James gave a half smile, the kind that wrapped itself around your ribs. My mop's always in the wings, don't worry. In Westland, it changed, slowly but steadily. A new class was introduced, voices of the margins, history, culture, and rights. Custodians got their own invitations to staff meetings for the first time in school history. The cafeteria finally removed the sad little staff-only sign taped to a rickety table in the corner, and now everyone sat together. And during PTA meetings, not just sharp-suited white moms and law firm husbands showed up. Grandmothers came too, black grandmothers in winter coats and pom-pom hats. Their grandkids still cleaned toilets on weekends, but they had seats at the table now. As for Senator Martin, he did what they always do, issued a smooth, soft interview, all rounded corners and practiced regret. Our society is evolving, he said, and we as a family are committed to growing alongside it. But everybody knew he hadn't evolved, he'd been pushed, nudged by James's quiet dignity, shoved by Sky's teenage defiance, and dragged by Lily's honesty. One evening, James received a letter. The handwriting was careful, strong, slightly shaky. Louisiana return address. Auntie Mary. She'd always called him her knight with a mop. Baby, you did what no diploma ever could. You didn't become a hero. You became a man. Heroes fade, but people, real people, they endure. I'm proud of you. James read it 5 times, then poured himself a strong cup of tea, pulled out an old notebook, and began writing. Not a complaint, not a speech, a book. He already knew the title. He just stayed. And a year later, in a school on the other side of town, not Westland, but a modest public school with flickering lights and leaky pipes, another janitor named Malcolm paused in a hallway beside a student in full panic. Couldn't breathe, shaking, alone. Malcolm sat down, didn't call for backup, didn't wait for permission. He reached out gently, and then he sang. The administration's first instinct was discipline. Old habits die slow, but before they could move, the internet moved faster. Hashtag, he sang too. Below it, a quote from an interview James had once given. Sometimes you just gotta stay. Not for a medal, not for a camera, just 'cause no one else is there. Malcolm kept his job. Correction, the school created a new one. Emotional navigator. And on the principal's office wall, a framed portrait of James. Not a decoration, a reminder. At first they feared he might stay, then they feared what would happen if he left. And James, he went on with life. Not perfect, but his. He didn't run for office, didn't write manifestos, didn't chase a platform. He worked, still a janitor, still with a mop. But every floor he cleaned held more than shine now. It carried dignity, legacy. He became the kind of man even the most polished principals greeted with, "Good morning, Mr. Norton." Not out of obligation, not out of fear, out of knowing his name couldn't be wiped off with a rag. And when the city elected its first black mayor, a moment carved into history, his inaugural speech carried the line that wrapped everything full circle. We ask for heroes, but sometimes they come wrapped in gray uniforms, humming lullabies in hallways full of silence. Thank you to those who stayed when others turned away. In the crowd stood James, in uniform, with his mop. And when the camera panned to him, the room stood, not for show, not for politics, but because some songs never fade. Even when the singer steps off the stage,